Show. Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. I'm here in Strasbourg in the European Parliament building tonight, where today, by 241 votes to 65, the Parliament decided in its monthly big plenary meeting, it's going to be in session here for 4 days, that they will not have a debate about the situation in Catalonia. So the most important issue facing European politics, and it's just too awkward for this travelling circus to even discuss. They'd rather bury it under the carpet and pretend it's not happening. Meanwhile, back at home, well, Boris Johnson is very good at making news, and sometimes it's for very good and very jolly things. Other times it's for supposed gaffes, and over the years we've heard Boris having to apologise to the people of Liverpool and Turkish premiers and all sorts of people. But this situation is perhaps a little bit more serious in many ways than anything that has come before. The story, if you don't remember it, is that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a 38-year-old, married to a British man, born and bred herself in Iran, was, in April of last year, arrested at Tehran airport as she was coming home with a young daughter. She'd been to visit her parents. She was accused of plotting to overthrow the country's regime, and she was given 5 years in prison. And there's been quite a big lobby saying, you know, something ought to be done. Well, Boris Johnson, our Foreign Secretary, a couple of weeks ago, appeared before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and he was asked about Mrs. Ratcliffe, and this is what he said.
I have raised this case many times now with Javad Zarif and my Iranian counterpart. When you look at what Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was doing, it's just, you know, she was simply teaching people journalism, as I understand it, at the very limit. She was, and I hope that a way forward can be found. I must say I find it deeply depressing. I think it's totally contrary to the interests of the Iranian people for this to continue.
Well, that was Boris Johnson saying that she was there teaching people journalism. Crikey, I can't think of a bigger red rag to the Iranian government regime than that, given that she's already in prison because she's behaved in a seditious manner. Her husband, Richard Ratcliffe, absolutely furious, has talked about this mess and the potential that what Boris has done could finish up giving her another 5 years in prison. So there's been quite a lot of hue and cry over this for the last few days. But today, Boris Johnson has decided to revisit this issue because he's under a lot of pressure. Here was Boris today.
The British government has no doubt that Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe was in Iran on holiday, and that was the sole purpose of her visit. As I said in the House last week, my remarks on the subject before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee could and should have been clearer. And I acknowledge that the words I used were open to being misinterpreted, and I apologise. I apologise to Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe and her family if I have inadvertently caused them any further anguish.
Well, I mean, I like Boris, but goodness gracious me. OK, you could say he's apologised, but he said his words could and should have been clearer. Boris, your words were perfectly clear. You said she was there to teach journalism. And frankly, I think it's very, very disappointing that you haven't today given a full, clear apology. You are the Foreign Secretary, and a UK citizen is at risk because of what you've said. You have not retracted fully, and frankly, I don't think it's good enough. I really, really don't. Could have been clearer. He was as clear as he could have been. I'm asking you folks, is Boris Johnson, given what's happened here, is Boris Johnson up to the job of being Foreign Secretary? And if you think the guy's a complete catastrophe, well, call me on 0345 60 60 973. Perhaps you think, look, hey, come on, we all make mistakes in life, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you think, do you know what, it's just Boris being Boris, leave him alone, in which case tweet your thoughts to Farage and LBC at LBC. And I'm going to go straight to Frank in Harlow. Frank, did Boris Johnson give the kind of apology today that she deserved?
Well, today he finally did. yes, he had to do that. But he should have been a lot sharper. He should have been a lot more upfront with the original case. But can I just say, Nigel?
Yeah.
Are you after his job?
No, I'm not after his job at all. I mean, look, I'm a fan of Boris, and I'm thrilled, particularly. I mean, I think, firstly, he's brought a bit of humour into public life and politics, and that is a good thing, because there's an awful lot of very dour people out there. And secondly, his intervention in the referendum was really vitally important, and on a personal level, I've always liked him, Frank. But I think, here's my problem. OK, he's apologised. Took him a hell of a long time to do that, and he really didn't come fully clean, Frank, did he? He said that I could and should have been clearer in what I said. No, he couldn't have been any clearer in what he said. He said she was there to teach journalism. And I sort of felt, frankly, this was a pretty half-hearted apology, Frank.
Well, yes. To be a foreign secretary, you must be articulate. And you must deal with the world of commerce. And you must speak, you must be briefed. You must be a kind of eloquent person when you are dealing with other cultures and other languages. And you must be eloquent. It must be perfectly transcribed. So,
well, I think Frank. I mean, Frank, he is eloquent. He is eloquent. And, well, I say he can be extremely articulate, and then we get the sort of bumbles and stumbles some other times. But, you say, Frank, he needs to be briefed. Of course he needs to be briefed, but being briefed is one thing. Having a mastery of the brief is another. Now, clearly, he didn't know his facts when he appeared before the committee and said she'd been there teaching journalism. But, realising, as he would have done, as all of us did within 24 hours, that this potentially made the situation of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe far worse than it had been before. Frank, my view, and say I don't want his job, but my view is he should have acted far more quickly than he has, and he should have been a bit franker today than he was.
Yeah. Can I just have the final word, please, Nigel?
Sure.
Boris, get her out now.
Right, OK, so, Frank, you think he should grab the initiative, get over to Iran and get her out of that prison, yeah?
Get her out there now.
Right, OK, Frank, thank you very much indeed. Frank likes Boris but thinks he needs to do a little bit more than he's done. I'm not sure anyone would disagree with that necessarily, unless, of course, you think that it's all really far too late and he's proved he's not up to it. Trevor is calling me from Marylebone. Trevor, good evening.
Nigel, good evening.
So, is Boris up to it, Trevor?
Absolutely. I mean, what's happening here, Nigel, and can I say at once that I'm a Brexiteer, and so I'm in favour of much of what you say, but I don't agree with you on this particular issue. I think that what's happening is, under the guise of Boris bashing, what we're doing is we're losing sight of what's really happening, which is that the evil regime in Iran has imprisoned unlawfully a citizen of our country, and rather than the powers that be concentrating on what's going on there is so much politicising of what's going on, and with the greatest respect, I think you're doing it as well, and that is that...
Well, Trevor, be fair, I haven't said that he's not up to the job of being Foreign Secretary. I've asked that question of you and all the other callers and texters and tweeters, but what I have said, Trevor, is that he didn't have mastery of his brief. What I would add, when you talk about this regime, this bad regime, and a British citizen's life, and liberty being seriously threatened, he should have been more sensitive. But, Trevor, my beef with him isn't... Because I think, you have to apologise sometimes in life. If you've got something horribly wrong and it's really, really going to potentially damage someone, it took him too long, Trevor, and today he just wasn't frank enough.
Okay, well, at the end of the day, there was an apology. And the thing is, even the apology, it's that level of acquiescence and appeasement of the regime that is at the core of the problem here. And we lose sight in this, debate about what Boris said or what he didn't say. The fact is that this poor woman is languishing in Iran, and I don't.
Yep.
And my concern is that focusing on what our Foreign Secretary said initially, and you're quite right, he was wrongly or poorly briefed, but at the end of the day, he made an apology. And of course, when I talk about politicizing, it's the opposition or whoever, it is saying it's not good enough. Well, what's not good enough is the fact
I'll tell you what's not good enough, Trevor. What's not good enough, Trevor, it's taken nearly a couple of weeks of angst and anguish for this family, knowing that what he's said has made Nazanin's position very much worse than it was before. It's taken him too long, Trevor, to reach the conclusion that he needs to apologise.
But see, I'm sorry, Nigel, it begs the question, who is saying that it's made her position worse? It's the media, it's the press. I'm not sure to what extent the Iranian government is saying her position's made worse. I mean, goodness sake, it was bad enough in the first place.
Yes, it was.
She did. Yeah, and so what we're doing, it's like a conflagration when the real issue, in my opinion, is not the fulsomeness of Boris's apology, but it's the regime that no one is really addressing.
So, Trevor, let me ask you quickly, are you in absolute fulsome support of Boris as Foreign Secretary?
Absolutely.
Super. Trevor, thank you very much indeed. We must remember, I get by text, that Boris is one of the very few people in the Cabinet that believes in Brexit. Regardless of the gaffes, he should be an influential person deciding the future direction of our country, says Ollie. It is now clear that if a Brit is in trouble, the British government just don't give a damn. We're on our own. Boris is the court jester. Time for his departure, methinks, says Steve. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg, and it's 7:15. Boris Johnson has been apologising today to Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and her family for the further anguish he's caused by saying she was in Iran teaching people journalism when actually she was there on holiday. He's also been in Brussels today, and there's been a big meeting in Brussels today. The 27 members of the European Union plus us met today to talk about PESCO. We discussed this at length on Thursday evening about closer military intervention, a big step forward towards a European army. And a little later in the show, I will tell you the results of that meeting today. Meanwhile, we're back to Boris. I'm asking you, is he up to the job of Foreign Secretary? I like Boris. I'm a Boris supporter. He's a really important voice out there, particularly in terms of Brexit, where he's one of the few people who has positive things to say about our future as a global trading nation. And I don't want him to go as Foreign Secretary, but my feeling is that today he should have apologised properly. To say, my words could and should have been clearer when I spoke about her, well, his words were clear. He said she was teaching journalism. Why not come clean, hold your hands up, admit you've got it completely wrong? That's my view. Some think he's a great guy and must stay regardless. Others think he's really, frankly, not up to it. And I wonder what Casey, who's calling from Acton and is a first-time caller to the show. Casey, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you doing?
So what do you think, Casey?
Well, first of all, I'd like to put my heart out there for the family.
Yep.
And second of all, Boris Johnson, bit of a joke, to be honest. I'm sure he's getting ready for his Christmas with his own family. I'd just like to hope that he's got in his head what he's done to other family. And I believe it's a bit of a joke because there's no evidence that she was teaching journalism, number one. Number two, he should have, in that position of his power, he should have had his facts right first. And second of all, that person who gave him that information should be struck off. And third thing, as a British person and as I see my government, I believe we are a powerful force and I believe that we can just go in and just take her. I don't see why there's a reason why they can't just let her go, why we can't just go in and take her. I don't understand.
Well, Casey, many years ago, and I'm going back to 1980, there was a big hostage situation in Iran, and Jimmy Carter sent in helicopters to try and spring the hostages. Helicopters crash. A lot of US servicemen got killed. Going in and getting out prisoners or hostages from any situation, Casey, involves a huge degree of risk, doesn't it?
Sign me up, mate.
Sign you up, right, okay. Yeah. Right, now you are the real definition, Casey, of a freedom fighter, and you clearly care about what's happening to this woman, what's happening to this family. Does all this show to you, does it show that Boris lacks compassion?
Yes. He lacks empathy,
and do you
he
think
lacks compassion.
Yeah.
And I believe he should not be Home Secretary. I'm sorry, he's a buffoon.
Well, Foreign Secretary.
He's a dumbo.
Yeah. Right, OK, he's got to go. Casey's clear, he's got to go. He's no blooming good. And if we need a task force to go into Iran to free her, he is fully signed up. Wow. Rhys is calling me from Altrincham. Rhys, what do you make of Boris's position?
Hello, good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
I would firstly like to say that I think actually what he has done is extremely commendable, because I think for far too long in politics we see when politicians make mistakes, they don't come forward, they don't apologise for it, and he clearly has made a mistake. But he has come forward, he's apologised for that mistake, and I actually thought it was a rather fulsome apology. But
Did you? So you, I mean, Rhys, let me just, push you a little bit on that. He said that his previous remarks to the committee could and should have been clearer. Surely, Rhys, a fulsome apology would have been, what I said was completely and totally wrong.
Well, I think really when you start overanalyzing it like that, he has apologised, he has said sorry, and I think really what's important here is that we don't start deflecting the blame, we don't start directing the blame at the Foreign Secretary. What we, I think, really need to recognise is that...
No, come on, Rhys. Come on, Rhys. How can we not? How can we not? It was him that used the phrase training journalists in the first place, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally accept that. He got it wrong, as I've said. He got it wrong, and he apologised for that. But I think, really, Michael Gove made a very important point the other day. I think it was on the Andrew Marr show, where he said that we shouldn't be deflecting this blame. At the end of the day, the blame is with Iran. This is a regime that continually and relentlessly imprisons foreign nationals for trumped-up charges, and this is yet another example of that. And I think I have absolute and unequivocal support in Boris Johnson doing what he...
No, Rhys, I understand that. He has apologised. I don't think it's as fulsome as it could have been, but hey, let's not argue too much on that point. And as far as Iran's concerned, you're the second caller that has said, let's not get this wrong. The real fault lies with that regime, and I do understand in the big picture that is, of course, absolutely right. How do you feel when you see our government, when you see the European Union shouting at Donald Trump, saying, hey, come on, guys, this nuclear deal we've done with Iran is a really good thing, and you're a real baddie, Donald, for being nasty to the Iranians?
No, I mean, I actually supported Donald Trump in his remarks, in his stance on the Iranian deal. I think it is important that when we are entering this, I think, new era of politics, that we are fully, I think, really open about it. And as Boris has been open with it, and I think Donald Trump embodies that as well, about being completely open and not really having almost...
and not worrying too much what everybody else thinks. No, I agree with that. Rhys, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Rhys, another first-time caller to the show. She may have dual citizenship, but essentially she remains an Iranian subject and is subject to the Iranian justice system. Well, she's married to a British person, so she has dual nationality. And I do think, whoever sent that message in, I do think that we have, as a country, some responsibility for somebody who is, through marriage, yes, but who is one of our citizens. I get on Twitter, I don't think MPs, media pundits, news outlets give a hoot about the young woman suffering. They just want to score points against Boris, says Arto. Well, I tell you what, Casey, who was on this show a few minutes ago, cared so much about her suffering, he's prepared to hop in a helicopter and go and free her. Connor is calling me from Walsall. Connor, good evening.
Hello, Nigel.
Hello. So, has Boris made a colossal mess of this, or did he today put it right?
I don't think he did put it right, because it's not like he made a mistake. He knew what he was saying. He said journalism. He didn't sort of stutter and, say the wrong word. It was clear. And he should know that Iran is a government and a regime that will, they don't tolerate anything against them, do they? They're quite extreme in a way. And he should know that that's probably one of the worst things that he could have said. I think apologising now may be a little bit too late, to be honest with you.
I mean, this has dragged on, hasn't it, for well over a week, of a lot of people demanding an apology. Jeremy Corbyn actually demanding that he was gotten rid of as Foreign Secretary. It has taken him quite a long time, Connor, to get to this point, hasn't it?
It has, but I think he probably realises what he did, and probably he's a Foreign Secretary. He should know better. He should have some common sense, really, when it comes to extreme sort of regimes. But I think he knows.
But you know what? We all make. But Connor, playing devil's advocate here. I mean, we all do make mistakes in life, don't we? We all say things that, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't said that.
Yeah, we do. But I mean, it's not like you said the wrong thing in the pub or something, because he said something that he's potentially, I should say, going to get someone longer in prison. And is it 5 years? 5 years, I think it is.
That's what it's rumoured to be. I mean, no one quite knows the truth about it. But so Connor, you're not happy with him as Foreign Secretary, no?
I do like him as Foreign Secretary, believe it or not. I just think there's one thing that he's done wrong, and I think he should realise that, and hopefully he doesn't do it again.
OK, fair dues. Connor, Boris mustn't do it again. Nigel, Boris has apologised, and if he does anything like it again, he should go. So someone there agreeing with Connor. Lots of MPs still have jobs that have made many blunders and given many lies, says Kathy. I wouldn't be comfortable ignoring the Boris phrase, as I understand it. He was qualifying his statement as if to say, I could be wrong. He was clearly trying to help. Given this, I think the apology was more than adequate, says Lee in Dulwich. Richard in High Wycombe, another new caller to the show. Richard, was his apology good enough? Is he the right man to be our Foreign Secretary?
Nigel, good evening. No, he's not.
Good evening.
I have been, over the years, a great fan of Boris.
Yep.
I know he has his shortcomings, but I was a great fan until recently. And what he has done, as far as I'm concerned, is inexcusable. I don't believe he's fit for purpose as Foreign Secretary, let alone any other high position of state. And I'm afraid I've lost faith in him.
So there is talk, Richard, that if Mrs. May goes, and goodness me, every week that goes by, her position, it seems to me, gets rather weaker. You don't see Boris as being the right man to tilt for the top job, then?
No, absolutely not. There was a time when I did, but not now.
Yeah. And what's the one thing, Richard, that's made you lose faith?
His complete, his ineptitude in holding this very, very high office of state.
OK. No, Richard, thank you. Ineptitude, says Richard. Not good enough to be Foreign Secretary. Certainly not good enough to be PM, in the view of Richard from High Wycombe. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show. It's 7:30. I'm asking you whether Boris's apology today was fulsome enough and whether he really is up to being Foreign Secretary, having made such a howler as saying that Nazanin was working as a foreign journalist when actually she was there on holiday. I'm asking that. But in Brussels today, there's been a Foreign Affairs meeting. 28 countries have been there in the room. And on the agenda, as we discussed on this show on Thursday evening, and as was not being discussed in British media at all, was this vital point that following on from Jean-Claude Juncker the other week saying that by 2025 there'll be full military integration within the European Union, namely there will be a European army, that today was a big decision to move on to a programme called PESCO that leads to joint defence decision-making and much, much more integration in terms of procurement. You know, no one country being able to order all of its tanks, all of its ships of its own manufacturers. A big step towards a European Union. Well, PESCO was agreed today. It'll be launched publicly in December, but I am pleased to say that the British did not sign up to it, nor did the government of Ireland, nor did Denmark, as we speculated on Thursday, and nor did Malta. So there are some countries there that are staying out of it. It doesn't mean that at some point in time we won't take part in joint missions. But overall, I would say that 23 nations pushing on now towards a European army is still a day that matters to us and matters hugely. Why? Because it will directly undermine NATO. Mr. Juncker, that nice man who is president of the European Commission, has been telling all these countries they don't need to spend as much as 2% on defence as Donald Trump suggests and as the NATO rules suggest. They can get away on a European level by paying just 1%. So whichever way you cut it, today's decision affects us because it significantly weakens the NATO alliance and the link with America. You will hear much more about this story over the years to come. And today, in the House of Commons, Brexit Secretary David Davis has been updating the House on what will happen at the end of the negotiating process.
We expect this bill to cover the contents of the withdrawal agreement. That includes issues such as an agreement on citizens' rights, any financial settlement, and the details on implementation period agreed between both sides. Of course, we do not yet know the exact details of this bill and are unlikely to do so until the negotiations are near completion. I should also tell the House that this will be over and above the undertaking we've already made that we'll bring forward a motion on the final deal as soon as possible after the deal is agreed, and that we still intend and expect for such a vote on the final deal to happen before the European Parliament votes on it.
So, David Davis there clarifying to the House that at the end of this process, the House of Commons will have a vote on the final shape of the Brexit deal. And that was taken initially by many people, particularly Keir Starmer and Labour, as being a significant concession. And then, a few minutes later, in answer to a question, he said, well, it's very simple. The House can vote on the deal that we do, and if they reject the deal that we do, we leave the European Union anyway, at which any thoughts of major concessions suddenly calm down a little bit. If we ever got to that point, it would be fascinating if there was actually a vote to potentially completely overturn the referendum. How it would go, well, I have to tell you, it would be very nip and tuck indeed. There would be Conservatives, and one can think of the Ken Clarks, the Anna Soubries, people like this, who would do anything they can to keep us in the European Union. But don't forget, there are people like Frank Field, Kate Hoey in the Labour Party who feel that Brexit absolutely should happen. It would, if it came to it, be very, very tight. And as for any deal of any kind, of course, don't forget that ultimately it will come here to Strasbourg, where after years of work, the European Parliament could veto the whole thing anyway. And given the mood this lot here are in, unless it's just that they don't like me, I don't know, but given the mood they're in, any thought of a deal that was seen to be generous to the United Kingdom in any way at all would, in their current mood, I think, be rejected. But back to Boris, back to this really quite distressing case, and it, you know, it isn't just the fact that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is serving 5 years in prison, being told that she'd acted in a seditious way to try and bring down the Iranian regime. And it isn't just that whatever Boris has said has certainly not helped her case, and some speculate could double her prison sentence. But there have also been some pretty big health scares around today, that there is talk of a cancer scare around her now as well. So very, very tough times for that family indeed. No wonder that her husband, Richard Ratcliffe, is asking the government to solve the mess that they've started. I'm asking, is Boris Johnson up to the job as Foreign Secretary? And I'm going to go to Emily in Kensal Rise. Emily, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for the show. I actually was thinking, no, don't phone, don't pick up the phone. And I thought, I've just got to.
You've never called before, Emily, so you must feel quite strongly about this.
Well, it's just, the fact is, I lived in Iran, and I had to leave because of the revolution.
Oh, wow.
And I feel I have an inside feel of how a country can change overnight.
Yeah.
And even though when I was there, it was full of secret police, so it's very difficult. You couldn't really go and have a political conversation in a public arena. You just couldn't do that. And I should imagine it's probably even worse now. I don't know. But I like the Iranian people. However, on that note, you don't mess with these countries. These countries, they must look at us like we're crazy. No, that's not even the right word. I actually find it quite scary what's happening right now. I find the whole thing that even if she was doing what Boris said she was doing, what are you doing saying that to a country like that takes everything very, very seriously?
So it's a grave error from Boris, yeah?
Iranian citizen. She is Iranian. And it will fall heavier on her.
Yes. So Emily, given the sensitivities, and by the way, you talked about the Iranian people and liking them, and I think I'm right in saying that they are the best educated people in that part of the world by some margin. And whenever I meet Iranian people, I did business before. I worked with Iranian people. Always found them incredibly charming. But given this regime, do you think Boris has made a mistake too far, Emily?
Do you know what? I can't even answer that question because I find it so foreign to my mouth that we're actually even having this conversation. That's how scared I am for her.
Yes. Yeah. And Emily. And Emily, asking you, and a lot of callers, Emily, like you, expressing genuine concern about her situation. And as I said a moment ago, equally there's a bit of a health scare there now as well, which just worsens things for her and for the family. And Emily, having lived in Iran and seen what happened to it, how do you feel when the European Union and Obama, as it was so desperate to try and do a deal with Iran, and when Trump says, don't trust them? Which side of the fence are you on that?
In a way, I don't really want to get involved in that, quite frankly, because at the moment I only rank, because you'd never get me off the line, really, to be honest with you. I could sit next to you and parlay all night long about every subject that ever comes up on LBC. I've actually experienced on some level or another. But, for me personally, I pray to God that the world finds its sense and stands up and stops all this insanity that's happening globally, and starts and that we all. To me, I tell you what the world is like right now. I think in the 50s they did some science fiction comic books where they almost predicted what is happening now. And we're living, and I feel we're living in that world now, and it's just time to rewrite the books.
Rewrite the books, start again. Emily from Kensal Rise, new caller to the show, somebody who lived in Iran. Thank you very much for the call. One thing that is for certain about Iran today is that LBC would not be able to exist and broadcast there. Not a chance, because they haven't got free speech, which we have, which whether you like this show or don't, is great, because you can come on and agree. But equally, you can come on and have a go at me if you want to. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. It's 7:45. So Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, says that Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is in Iran, was in Iran, teaching people journalism. Then the story changes. No, actually, she was there on holiday. Either way, the woman is serving a 5-year sentence in some horrific Iranian jail. Boris did today, after a break of nearly 2 weeks, give an apology. I felt it wasn't particularly fulsome, particularly when he said he should have been clearer in his words. He was perfectly clear in his words. They were just simply, if you believe what he said today, they were wrong. And I'm asking, is he up to being the Foreign Secretary? In Boris, we have a highly intelligent, multilingual Foreign Secretary. Did he mess up? Yes. Was the apology up to much? Not really. Has what he said made much difference to her fate? Probably not a chance. And for those of you that are interested, you can join me for an evening live at the Hippodrome on Wednesday, the 10th of January, in aid of Global Radio's Make Some Noise. There are just a few tickets left, and to look at tickets and prices, read the terms and conditions that are available, go to lbc.co.uk, Wednesday, 10th of January, in the Hippodrome in London. Benjamin is calling me from Ilford. Benjamin, are you satisfied with what Boris had to say today?
Hi, Nigel. Not the least. First time caller to your show, not the least. I mean, Boris has got to go without a doubt. I mean, it doesn't take...
Do you think he's... Benjamin, just before you go, do you think he's got to go because of this issue, or do you see this in a broader context?
In a broader context, it's been one thing after the other. I think it's got to the point where he's got to go. Otherwise, we don't know what he's going to do next. I mean, take his apology, for instance. That's not an apology. When you apologize for something, you're admitting that what you said was wrong or what you said wasn't true. But this is not what he's doing. He's actually saying, I'm sorry if what I said confused you guys or misled you guys. He's not even bold enough to say what he said wasn't true or was wrong.
Well, Benjamin, I'm with you. Benjamin, this is exactly how I feel about this. You know, if you're going to... And he did use the word apologise, but if you're going to apologise, don't say I could and should have been clearer. It's not a matter of clarity, is it? He said that she was there teaching journalism as opposed to the line now that she was on holiday. It's very odd, isn't it?
That's correct. So today he should have come out to say, what I said about her teaching journalists was false. I was wrong on that. She was actually there on holiday. No point going around beating the bush, saying I could have been clearer and so on and so forth.
Yes,
and
yes, I agree.
I think the only reason why he's still in this position is just because the Prime Minister is probably considering the party first before anything else. That's it.
Well, party unity. Also, Benjamin, I guess you could make an argument that Boris, being what he is at least a recognised figure around the world.
Correct. But then again, if you're a recognised figure around the world, then we should expect better from you.
Well, I think that's a very good answer to that question. Benjamin from Ilford, first-time caller, call again, loved every second of it. I think the Whitehall Ramona Mandarins set a trap for him to scupper his leadership plan. That's a bit conspiratorial. You're suggesting that he was briefed that she was there teaching journalism and said what he was briefed, only for them later to say that wasn't true. Don't know. Don't really buy into that, I have to say. No, I don't buy into it at all, actually. Phil from Boston is calling. Phil, good evening. Has Boris done enough today to keep his position safe as Foreign Secretary?
Well, I don't know if he's done enough. For what your last comment has just said from that last email, that's exactly why I'm ringing. You see, he didn't just say... If you listen back to what he said about her teaching journalism, and then there was a phrase, from what I believe... He indicated there that he didn't know. He was reading. He was briefed.
I tell you what, Phil. I'm going to stop you there. Let's replay it, shall we? And let's both listen to it.
I have raised this case many times now with Javad Zarif and my Iranian counterpart. When you look at what Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe was doing, it's just, she was simply teaching people journalism, as I understand it. At the very limit, she was, and I hope that a way forward can be found. I must say I find it deeply depressing. I think it's totally contrary to the interests of the Iranian people for this to continue.
OK, Phil, you heard that. As I understand, it's what he said, yeah?
I understand understand it, that would indicate to me that he didn't know, but someone has briefed him, as I understand it. He is reading from his brief. People like Boris do not go into select committees, and you know this as a politician. They are briefed. They have given their heads up before they appear before select committees of what they should and shouldn't say. Not everybody can carry everything that a foreign secretary has to carry around inside his head. So he relies on Whitehall. Whitehall is so fanatically pro-European that they are bit by bit knocking off all the Brexiteers out of the government. Priti Patel went. He's now being undermined. And I tell you now, Gove will go next.
Well, Priti Patel was I think she did make some mistakes, but there are some that think she was too pro-Israel. And that the Foreign Office have never quite taken that view. OK, Phil, I'm listening carefully to what you're saying, that, you know, he could have been briefed this, and that's why he could have used that form of words. But she was, I mean, her parents live in Iran. She was there with her 3-year-old daughter for a couple of weeks. It doesn't kind of look like someone that was there teaching journalism, does it really?
Well, no, it doesn't at all. It was there. She was taking her child to visit her parents in Iran.
Yeah.
And whatever has happened has happened. And I firmly believe that Whitehall is trying to all the Brexiteers.
You think they've done him up like a kipper, don't you?
Yes, I do. I firmly believe that. Let's not forget that the Sir Humphrey Applebys of Yes Prime Minister are real people, and they are lethal people.
And they will do whatever they can to stop this country getting back its independence, Phil, yeah?
Yes, they will. They are doing everything they can now to stop Brexit. And this is Whitehall's machine now, targeting all the pro-Brexit ministers.
Well,
they will stop at nothing, Nigel.
Phil, I have to say, whether it's the big mandarins or whether it's the CBI or whether it's other global multinational businesses or the George Soroses of this world or whoever it is, the one thing I do agree with you on is they will stop at almost nothing to try and overturn the results that happened across the West in 2016. Phil, I thank you for the call. I still don't buy into the idea that he was set up with this, but I get the bigger picture as to why someone like Phil might think that. Nathaniel in Blackheath is going to be my last caller of the evening. Nathaniel, hello.
Amazing. Yeah, Boris Johnson is an absolute political buffoon. How he's done his job, as in a day, he has just played chess with a woman's livelihood, and as in her actual life, the way that Iran is, and he has not lost his job because of it. The scariest thing about this is what kind of dirt does he have on Theresa May and his current government that he can keep a job? Priti Patel has been forced to resign over something that was bad. It was bad, but no one was going to be hurt because of this. He has, as in the guy, as in you're a foreign secretary. Do you not think you've been briefed on what other countries are about? And he has said in front of a journalist that as in she was probably there doing journalism. How little do you know about the Middle Eastern country of Iran? You, as in any other workplace, he would have been thrown out to the wolves. And I'm scared, genuinely scared, by what he has on this government to be able to get away with what he's got.
Well, Nathaniel, there are lots of sort of conspiracy theories going back and forth here, and none of us know the answer to any of them. I would very much doubt he's got much on Theresa May at all, but I could be, of course, completely wrong. Very tough, though, Nathaniel, for her to sack him, isn't it? Because he's a big beast. He's a big beast, he's a recognised figure, and he's got a considerable degree of public support behind him.
He is a recognised figure for all the wrong reasons, as in the idea that as in you've made your political career off basically just being a bumbling idiot that people love to hate. As in I've lived in London my whole life, as Mayor of London. The only things that we can take away from Boris Johnson's career are him hanging from a zip wire, looking ridiculous, and Boris bikes. So it's a little bit like,
Well, Nathaniel, do you know what? Nathaniel? He was Mayor of London. He won 2 elections in what is increasingly a Labour city. I understand what you're saying. He does have some public appeal. My view is, of course Boris makes mistakes. He's always going to make mistakes. That's because he's Boris. But I want him to be a successful Foreign Secretary. I wish he'd apologise.